No, see people start coming. Oh, there's everybody. Mm.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Hello, hello. Happy International Women's Day.
We'll take another few seconds to let more people join.
The
So
weather
excited that you're all here.
today, Isabella. We're enjoying it here in the park. Yours looks amazing as well.
It's beautiful out, and it looks beautiful out in your park. Really glad that we get to be out here today, and thanks everyone for joining. All right. Well, without further ado, I think it is time to get started. We are so excited to welcome you to this special Women's HERstory Sportscast today. Thank you all so much for being here and welcome. My name is Isabella, and I am here at Asilomar State Beach. And we're so excited to get to spend some time with you today. I want to ask how everyone is doing. We could do a show of thumbs, can put an emoji reaction if you'd like. But how is everyone doing this Friday?
Woo!
Awesome. I'll give you 2 thumbs up. I'm feeling good and super excited to get to share this program with you all. Erika and Seven, how are you doing?
Hey, Isabella. We're doing great, aren't we, Seven?
I'm doing wonderful. The sun's finally out here. The birds are out today. It's gorgeous. Happy International Women's Day, Isabella, and everyone that's joining.
Happy International Women's Day. So our plan is that we are going to be spending 45 minutes with you all. And we're going to be sharing stories of 3 amazing women who are connected to our parks, who worked really hard to protect all these different spaces that you can see behind us and left some really cool legacies. So we will be bouncing around from our parks. You'll get to explore both the redwoods and the coastline here. And we're really excited to get to share that with you all. I think that it is time to take a look at our parks and check out what is going on. So I'm actually going to flip our camera around so we can take in the views of Asilomar.
So pretty.
So as we're looking around and taking in the beautiful views today, I would love for you all to make some observations. What are you seeing? And what can you notice right now about Asilomar? You're welcome to turn to a partner and share, or share out with your class. Let's take a moment and make some observations about the view. You might notice all the waves rolling in, the beautiful colors of the ocean water. You might see all the rocks in front of us. Asilomar is really famous for having this rocky shoreline. We do have some stretches of sandy beach, which is probably what you might imagine when you're thinking of the beach. We also have a lot of these rocks creating also a tide pool habitat. So that's one of the things people love to do when they visit Asilomar. They can go tide pooling and they can check out these rocks where ocean water gets trapped in them and creates homes for a lot of smaller ocean animals like sea stars, urchins, crabs, sometimes octopus. We have about 1 mile of coastline here in Asilomar. And as I mentioned, we are in Pacific Grove, California. So we are on the central coast, right in the middle of the state. We're next to the Pacific Ocean. And we're also right next to the city of Monterey. So thanks for taking a moment to look around Asilomar with me. I'm going to flip my camera back around. And I'd love to pass it off to Erika and Seven so we can learn a little more about the park they're in right now. And you're muted. Oh, Erika, you're muted right now.
See, I knew I was going to do that. All right. Well, you guys just tell me if I'm muted. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the beautiful Humboldt Redwoods State Park. I'm here with Seven. We're hanging out, International Women's Day, and let's just take a good look at this beautiful forest. Big tree. So beautiful. We're in the tallest forest in the world because redwood trees are the tallest trees in the world. So hope you guys can envision yourself being here in the forest right now, looking at the tallest trees that can reach over 350 feet. Redwoods are truly incredible, and there's a lot of great things about them. I'm just going to mention a couple of them. And right now, I just told you that they're the tallest trees in the world. They're part of the cypress family. They have an itty bitty tiny seed cone, about 2 inches, not very big, especially when you consider pine cones like sugar pine cones or culture pines that could be they have these really big seed cones. And inside the seed cone, there's a tiny, tiny little seed that's about the size of a tomato seed. Oh, it just fell. This, my friends, is the seed of a redwood tree. But redwoods are not just able to reproduce through seed. In fact, I'm going to throw that away because the most common way that they reproduce, you can see right here. So do you guys see this little branch that kind of looks like it's coming from the base? That's actually a reiteration. It's a clone. It's a sprout of this big parent tree. This is an old growth redwoods. And the reason why I really wanted to show you this tree is because that's what we're going to talk about in our program that me and Seven will be sharing about the women here in the redwoods, because they wanted to protect this big old growth. That's what they were really after. You can see that the rest of our forest, there's some really great trees, but they're really small. They look very young in comparison to our big mama tree right here. And these trees also have another superpower. And of course, there's so many other great adaptations that they have, but I can't get too much into that today. But right here, I don't know if you guys saw that hole. I'm going to get out for a second. So I don't know if you noticed that hole right there. This is actually a sign of stewardship, believe it or not. So as we segue into women, I do want to take a time right now to thank the original stewards of this area. And we're in the ancestral territory of the Lowland Caucasian peoples that for hundreds, thousands of years took care of these forests with fire. So these fire scars or these holes inside these trees were created by people. They did so to protect these forests and to keep them healthy. But unfortunately, our program takes place in a time when they didn't have the right and powers. They were under a lot of harm, and Native people couldn't do the things that the people that we talk about today could do. So I think it's really important that we had a woman, Laura Perot Mahan, that stepped up at a time that was very important to have these people step up to protect the remaining old growth. because there's only 4.6% of these trees left, not many left. Okay. And at a time when the women stepped up in Laura, there was 80%. So that shows you that you got to do it, and you got to do it fast, because you never know how long it's gonna take for it to all be gone. So thankfully we had women like her that got other women together, other clubs that banded together and preserved groves. Like Seven's going to be sharing a little bit later of some of the groves that women bought out, but one particular that has a very special monument that talks about women. And just want you guys to look what Laura looks like. Isn't she awesome? Well, I'm going to take it back to Isabella, so you can share, or was it you? Now I can't remember who's gonna talk about their person.
It's okay.
That's fine.
I'm going to jump in there and
Yeah.
do a little introduction. So today I actually had a little obstacle, just like all of these women. And my obstacle is that I had intended to come to you today from the Federation of Women's Clubs Grove. And that was going to be presenting to you from the Hearthstone that Julia Morgan, a very infamous architect, created. And so unfortunately, I can't be there. What I can do is show you a photo. Hopefully you can see that. It's a little glary. So here's my second option. And this is where technology could be fun. Maybe we could see this. Maybe we can't. Nope, that's not going to work. It's just showing you yourself. Well, today we are talking. Let's try that one more time. Can we see this video? We see the Hearthstone in all its glory from yesterday. And so what I had wanted to show you yesterday was this beautiful Hearthstone so that you could see it. And also just a little bit of what that land looks like. And panning over to the beautiful Eel River, kind of see some of these big trees in the background. And yay technology and yay obstacles. But that's what we're here for today on International Women's Day, is talking about the obstacles that some of us have come across. And so I'm going to bring it back and dive in to the Asilomar Ocean back there with our Marine Protected Area interpreter, Isabella, to talk about the importance of HERstory Day, or International Women's Day, and why we're actually here celebrating.
Thanks, Seven. It was great to see a glimpse of the Hearthstone, and I'm excited to hear more about it later in our program. But I want to pose this question to all of our viewers right now. Why are we celebrating Women's HERstory Month? And today is actually International Women's Day. What do you all think? Why are we celebrating this day? You can take a moment, share with a partner, or share out with your class. What do you think? Why are we celebrating this holiday? I'm sure you all had a lot of really great answers. And we have a few thoughts about why we are celebrating Women's HERstory Month and International Women's Day today. One of the themes that we've come across is that one of the barriers that women had was education. So this was not an opportunity that women had for most of history. And although it might be something that a lot of us take for granted today, including myself when I was in school, is that education, especially education past high school, so going to college and getting a master's degree or even a PhD, was not an option for a lot of women. For most of history, women were expected to be homemakers, where they raised families and took care of their children. So it was not expected that women would need an education if they were staying home and raising kids. So there were just not a lot of opportunities for women to keep going with their education past high school, and definitely not a lot of career fields and a lot of paths for women to work jobs, especially if it was in science or government or a few different fields. So that's one reason why we're celebrating this holiday is that women have overcome a lot of barriers in education. Erika and Seven, what do you think about why we're celebrating this holiday?
Definitely. That was a great reason. And one of the main reasons, especially why we're celebrating, is because at this time, when women that we're going to talk about were doing this type of work, they couldn't vote. Okay. So women didn't get the right to vote until 1920. And that was just a certain group of women, because women of color and other types of women didn't get the right to vote until the 60s in some cases. So this was a privilege that women were fighting for quite a long time. And so when I set the scene, and when we're talking about Julia Platt, we're talking about Laura Mann, I want you to think about over 100 years ago and how that space might have been for women, what some obstacles were, like not being able to vote, not being able to have the paths to higher education that some of us now are privileged to. So there was a lot of obstacles. And Seven, do you want to join in?
Yeah, there has been a lot of obstacles. And why I believe that we're here celebrating International Women's Day and HERstory Month is that I have been inspired by so many women who have been trailblazers who came before me. I'm inspired by the women that I'm here presenting with today. And I'm inspired by the architect, Julia Morgan, who has created spaces for women and for people to come together and gather. And we're going to be diving into that a little bit more here when I get into the architecture and the history of Julia herself. But really think about the women in your life who have come before you that allowed you to be having the experiences that you are today. All of us have different privileges in life, whether it's someone we know, perhaps it's our education, maybe it is finances. We all have different ways that we can allow others to come in behind us. And I think it's really important that we celebrate the mark that women have left and the legacy that they have left, as well as the mark that you can leave. Back to you, Erika.
Yeah. So many reasons why we should be celebrating Women's HERstory Month, but also International Women's Day. And I'm sure you guys all have your great reasons as well. Maybe you can type it in the chat. We'd love to hear about that. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you my hero here in the Redwoods. And her name is Laura Perot Mann. So if you can say it out loud at the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, Laura Perot Mann.
Man.
And I picked up a picture of her when she was young because it's like the best quality one. But actually, a lot of the work that she did didn't happen until much later in her life. But Laura was a woman that wasn't really of her time. She was determined. She really wanted to pursue other things in life besides just, the typical things that women were seen to do, which was, to have babies, take care of the home, be homemakers. And Laura, she saw other things for herself. She actually attended college, which, as Isabella mentioned before, not only was really difficult for women to go, some degrees weren't even out, like women couldn't even do those. But Laura, nonetheless, at her time decided, I want to go to college. So she actually went to Johns Hopkins Art Institute in San Francisco in 1880. So she was born in 1886 in a little town that's about 40 minutes from here in Lolita. So Miss Mann got to play in these beautiful forests. She got to be a little girl and hang out in the magical old growth redwood trees. And in her short time of being alive, she saw what was happening to these trees. She saw the devastation that was coming underway in Humboldt County. And it took place in many different areas. So it wasn't just the cutting of trees, as you guys can see here, of the old ancient trees that are thousands of years old, but it also meant that they were overfishing, right? Kind of similar to what was happening in Asilomar. They were changing landscapes, but essentially they were going for big, big, big redwood that was making people money. So women at this time couldn't vote, right? So they really had to band together. And this is where we start seeing the rise of women's clubs and groups. Because if you're a woman back in those days and you can't vote, women got creative and they banded together and would join clubs and groups to advocate for causes that they cared about, like the right to vote, like workers' rights, and environmental causes as well. So women were doing it all. And these are just some of the examples of the type of work that they were doing. So Laura didn't do this by herself, right? And I think that's the most important thing to remember. And our interpreter Seven is going to chime in a little bit more about the women, other women that helped. But Laura didn't do this by herself. She was a leader, but she needed other women that also wanted to join the cause of preserving old growth redwoods. And I want you guys to see just how big it is. Seven, come over here. Yeah, Seven, you stand there. That's great.
That's so cool.
So then, not like a big person, but you can see just what we're talking about when we mean old growth. She's 5'5" for reference. Okay. So women couldn't vote. There was a lot of obstacles at this time. So they had to be very creative to protect places like this. So this is going to be a little exercise for all of you that are watching this. And I'm going to let your teacher decide. If you are a chatty class, then maybe you guys can write like a list. If you are maybe a class that does well with interacting with others, you guys can discuss with your partner. But I'm going to give you about a minute. I'm going to show you the awesome canopy of these trees at that time. But I want you to think about, if you're a woman at this time, how do you get your message out to protect redwoods? I'm not looking for one answer. There's probably many. So I'm going to give you guys a minute. What are you going to do to save these trees? Go. So I lied. I'm not giving you a whole minute. But I hope that you had a little bit of time to just start thinking about what some of these ways might have been. And women had to be really creative. So we're just going to share a couple of these ways because there was a lot of things that they did. But maybe some of these things you said. So we're going to start with the first one that I think is the most obvious. Wrote petitions, signed petitions. Petitions are, there's a cause that people support and you get all of those people to sign and then you give it to some sort of lawmaker, legislator. You're like, look here, we all support this. So that's one thing they did. All right. If you said that they wrote articles or maybe they got the word out via newspaper, then you are correct. So these women also had connections, right? We all have a friend that knows a friend that maybe worked in publishing or newspapers. Some of them were married to people that worked in these spaces. So they were able to get their word out. All right. They were doing a lot of the grassroots work, a lot of getting the word out to the public, which was really important. Another way that they did that, if you said protesting, kind of, these women were actually very rich. I don't know if you can tell by their fancy coats and the fact that they had a car when not a lot of people had cars, but they were privileged, right? They had the time to devote to these causes and they paraded around and blasted a sign that said save the redwoods in all the towns here in Humboldt County. So a lot of people saw that. And the other thing that's really important is that these women, they had moolah, they had money, right? They came from families that had money and they knew how to fundraise. And that is what really saved these trees. It was money and people with money that were able to donate to preserve these spaces. So really important, the money aspect here. And then last but not least, this is my favorite one. It's that they got special permission to stamp every single piece of mail that left Humboldt County with a stamp that said save the redwoods. Just imagine how many people around this time knew somebody that lived in this county that probably saw that. There's movements that have started from hashtags nowadays. So there's some connections, but they were very creative to get the word out. And Laura was instrumental in all this because she was the president of this club. So without her, we wouldn't have 1/3, and without all these other women that helped preserve these spaces, 1/3 of all these beautiful trees. And it just makes me kind of sad, right? Because if people like her and Julia Platt didn't step up at a time where there was all these overfishing happening, logging, we wouldn't have these beautiful parks. So I want to give some time so that Isabella can share about Julia Platt and just everything that she did to preserve the coast in Monterey.
Thank you so much, Erika. And that was so special to hear about Laura Mahan's work up in the Redwoods. And I was seeing some great things in the chat too about different ways that you can make a difference in your community, just like Laura Mahan and a lot of those women's groups were doing. So thanks for sharing that. And I am really excited to get to share another story with a lot of similarities to Laura Mahan. But it is about a woman who, instead of protecting the redwoods, she really wanted to protect the ocean here. And this woman's name is Julia Platt. Can everyone say that with me? Julia Platt. Yeah. Here she is. This is Julia in 1893. She was born in 1857 in San Francisco, which is only about 2 hours north of where I'm standing. But she actually grew up on the East Coast. And Julia was a pretty unusual person because she pursued a lot of education. So while she lived on the East Coast, she attended college. She did a lot of research at Harvard. And then she actually got a PhD. And she had to go to Germany to get a PhD because there were no opportunities for women in the United States to get a PhD in the field that Julia wanted to study, which was marine biology. So Julia went to Germany to study marine biology. She was studying sharks there, which is super cool. And she moved back to Pacific Grove, the town I'm in now, in the year 1900. And I also do want to point out that this is a picture of Julia when she was still pretty young. But a lot of her lasting work and the contributions she made didn't happen until she was older, and it was later in her life, just like Laura Mahan did. So Julia moved here to try to continue studying marine biology, but unfortunately she wasn't given opportunities to do that at the nearby Marine Research Station. But as we can already tell, Julia was a super determined person. She was really wanting to continue taking action and doing things with her life. So she decided to stay in Pacific Grove, and she would eventually be able to use her knowledge and her passion for marine biology to create coastal protection. So Julia lived here in Pacific Grove, and she was really involved in local government and rallying the town around what she cared about. And while Julia lived here, there was a lot of sardine fishing happening. And as Erika was mentioning, unfortunately, a lot of this was overfishing, where people were taking too many sardines out of the ocean. Their population was becoming really small, and it just wasn't sustainable. And the fishing companies were not listening to the advice of scientists who were warning them that this was too much. It was too intense. So Julia and a lot of other people in the community were really concerned about that. And Julia eventually became the first female mayor of Pacific Grove. This was in the year 1931. And she had been watching over years this fishing get worse and worse. The ocean was not very healthy because of it. So she decided to use her power as the mayor and create some of the first marine protected areas in California. So I want you to take a moment and think about why do you think we needed that marine protection here, that ocean protection? How do you think that could have helped against a lot of this overfishing that was happening? As we're pausing, I'm not able to see the Humboldt Redwoods camera. I don't know if you turned that off on purpose. Okay, awesome.
We're still
All
here.
right. So as we were thinking about marine protection, I'm going to pull up some pictures quickly so we can talk more about that. But Julia decided that we needed some protected areas on the coast here to try to protect against this overfishing. So she created the Hopkins Marine Life Refuge, which is just down the street from where I'm standing. And here, this was an area where there was no fishing or collecting allowed. So it was a place where fish populations and other animals could live safely and they could increase their populations. It's kind of like a charging zone for the ocean. And Julia's thinking with this coastal protection was decades before it really became some of the modern rationale and thinking. Because at this point, there were some parks on land, like national parks and California state parks, but no one was really thinking about protecting the ocean. It was thought of as like a vast and unlimited resource. And a lot of the things Julia was thinking about, predicting that fish populations would increase and there would be the spillover effect, which is when different fish babies and other animals will spill over and go to other non-protected areas where they can start replenishing the ocean there. She was thinking of this and predicting it decades before it became modern science and modern thinking. So it's really impressive that she was creating this legacy of ocean protection. And now this is a modern map of Pacific Grove. And you can see that Lovers Point - Julia Platt State Marine Reserve, that is what used to be the Hopkins Marine Life Refuge. And the Pacific Grove Marine Gardens State Marine Conservation Area was the other marine protected area Julia Platt created. So they are still around today. And I'm here at Asilomar on the left side of the peninsula. So she really created this precedent for all of the ocean protection that we still have in Pacific Grove today. And not only do we have this local protection, we now have a network of marine protected areas. There are 124 of them all up and down the California coast. So it's really exciting that here we had this head start into ocean protection where this amazing woman was thinking ahead and thinking of ways that she could help her local community, even against this huge problem of overfishing. And now, thanks to Julia, we can find all sorts of ocean life and different habitats in these marine protected areas she created. We can find animals like sea stars, also known as starfish. You can find sea slugs. This is one of my personal favorites. It's a sea lemon. I think they're super cute. We can find anemones and a lot of marine mammals, including the sea otter, which is one of our famous animals here in Pacific Grove and nearby Monterey. And these otters are still endangered. So having this marine protected area here at Asilomar and in Pacific Grove really helps them find a lot of the food they need and helps to increase their population as well. So we can really thank Julia for the ocean protection she created and the legacy she left behind that now myself and millions of visitors get to enjoy. Here at Asilomar, not only do we have this ocean protection, but there is another amazing tie to a different woman whose name is Julia Morgan. And I'll pass it over to Seven so she can share a little bit more with us. Yeah, take it away.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Interpreter Seven. I know I have a unique name. So yeah, it's 7 like the number, in case you were trying to figure that out. And you may have seen me doing this, the heart to my chest, throughout the presentation or in some of the upcoming videos that we did to bring you to today. And this is the International Women's Symbol for Inclusivity. And so maybe take a moment to bring your heart, hands to your chest so that you can also be in that moment with us. So we are going to be talking about another Julia now, not to confuse you, but this Julia is named Julia Morgan. So on the count of three, let's say her name. 1, 2, 3. Julia Morgan.
Morgan.
So Julia Morgan is an infamous architect. Some of you may have heard of Hearst Castle. That's one of her more famous pieces of architecture. But today we are tying in Julia Morgan and how she's connected to Asilomar State Beach, how she's connected to Humboldt Redwoods State Park, and why she is important for us to learn about. So right behind me right now is a little bit of the understory of the Redwoods. You can see there's down logs. There's a bunch of duff. There's not really a way to get through, right? There's literally no trail. So what does it mean to be a trailblazer? Think about that for just a second. What does it mean to be a trailblazer? Well, a trailblazer is usually the first person that goes in to face the obstacles, like we see here. If you're the first person that's going in to face the obstacles, you're most likely going to be the one that has the most resistance. That's not necessarily easy, is it? So the trailblazers are the ones that go through, deal with the obstacles, and eventually make space for you, for me, and for others to come in. And so just to show you an example, this is now the trail. And since I didn't get to come to you today from the Hearthstone, I have my own obstacles. I had to turn around and reroute. I had to come over here to a different location and improvise a little bit. Did I give up? No. And neither did Julia. Julia is a trailblazer because she's a woman of firsts. We talked a little bit about having the right to vote. We talked a little bit about education and the rights to those. Well, similar to Laura and similar to Julia Platt, Julia Morgan was also a first. She was the first woman to go to the University of Berkeley and to attend school as an engineer. Now, she really wanted to be an architect. So had she had the opportunity to go to school to be an architect, she would have done it then. But that degree and that program didn't even exist. So Julia goes to school to become an engineer. And at this time, this is like 100 years ago, actually more than 100 years ago, women were not going to school to become engineers. And even today, women are still underrepresented in the world of engineering and building. So this is a really big deal. So Julia goes to school in Berkeley, and she is not only the only woman in the engineering program, but she's pretty much the only woman in her math classes, in her engineering classes, science classes, etc. And so that was a really big deal. But after that, Julia really, really wanted to get her architecture degree. Back to the idea of privilege that we talked about. Julia came from a family that knew some people. And by the people that she knew, she was able to gain access. At this time, she had a friend that was living in France and going to a very prestigious school that actually did have a program in architecture. And the government had decided they were going to let women enroll in the college. However, they were only going to let them enroll in art and in sculpture. Well, Julia recalls they didn't say anything about women joining in the architecture program. And in fact, she thinks that they didn't even consider it. So what did she do? Julia, with the help of her friend, decided that she was going to apply to be an architect and join the architecture program. So for her first attempt, do you think she got in? What do you think? Do you think she got in?
No.
No. Did she give up? No. She tried for a second time. A second time. What do you think? Did she give up? Did she get in? She didn't get in, and she didn't give up. On her third try, dust yourself off and try again. Third try, Julia gets into the school and goes through the program and becomes the first ever woman to graduate with an architecture degree from that college. Well, from there, Julia comes back to her hometown of California and becomes the first licensed architect in the state of California. Again, another first. From there, Julia decided that she was really going to make her mark. And her mark is all over the state of California. She is responsible for building over 700 buildings. But her biggest client, or the biggest group that she built for, was the YWCA. And the YWCA came after the YMCA, W standing for women. So this group was very, very important. The YWCA was one of the first groups that was geared towards women, women coming together, women learning. In fact, as a young girl, I was influenced by the YWCA. That was where I had opportunities to go and learn gymnastics, learn how to swim, and gather with other girls that helped me find my own personal power. How is this related, though, to Asilomar State Beach? And how is Julia related to Laura Mahan? Well, we're going to talk about that now. Asilomar State Beach used to be a women's conference center that was owned by the YWCA. And that is one of the biggest YWCAs that actually exists. Out of the 17 that Julia built, Asilomar is the largest. Later down the road, the state of California purchased that area, and it is now Asilomar State Beach. How does this connect to Laura Mahan? Can we get another little view of Laura? Let's just remember who Laura Mahan is. That's Laura. Awesome. So, moving along, Asilomar State Beach. Julia created this amazing building, the conference center. And I want you to see if you can see some similarities to the Hearthstone that is here in Humboldt Redwoods State Park. This is one of Julia's most famous arts and crafts architecture that she ever built. And isn't that interesting that she was so known for the arts and crafts movement when she was invited into school to be in the art and sculpture program as a woman, but instead became an architect. So Julia, being innovative, used the redwoods that were around here for her to have the base of what was the Hearthstone. The Hearthstone was created because the California Federation of Women's Club was created. And through the Save the Redwoods League, which was led by Laura Mahan, they were able to come together and purchase the Grove, the California Federation of Women's Clubs Grove. That is where the Hearthstone is. And so Julia was commissioned to build the Hearthstone. The concept is strength united is stronger. So she built 4 different Hearthstones. And if you're not sure what a Hearthstone is, that's really just the fireplace. There's 4 fireplaces, but there's 1 uniting chimney. So I want you to think about how these 4 different fireplaces together can create a bigger, burning, more impactful fire, or a more impactful spark that we can create in the world to trailblaze and to allow others to come and join us. So not only did Julia become the first architect in California, she created spaces for women like you and me and young girls to come together and gather. And that's really, really important. Women today still come and gather at the Hearthstone for meetings, for clubs. And really, really important, that is where the location was when the Grove was dedicated and given to the park. So if Julia Morgan is in one of those fireplaces, if Julia Platt is in the other fireplace, and Laura Mahan is in the other, that's only 3. That leaves 1 more fire to burn, 1 more spot. Maybe that spot is for you. What kind of fire are you going to create? What kind of change can you create? And how can you help us be stronger united? So at this time, we want you to think about that. What kinds of groups have you been a part of? What women in your life have created open spaces for you to come in and take up your space?
And thank you so much for joining us today on International Women's Day to learn about the HERstory that made our parks possible. And that's pretty much the conclusion of our program. And we just thank everyone for joining us today on a beautiful day, thankfully. And I think we have maybe a minute or two to look through some questions. So Let's do that. Let's see.
Thank you all so much for joining. And yeah, you can put any questions in the chat. You're welcome to stay on for a few minutes if you have any questions. We'd love to answer them.
No questions. But we did have some good responses to what would you do if you wanted to preserve. So we had some people put they would protest. We had some people say they would make a big circle around the tree. Yeah, a tree sitting, right? Tree protest, really good. That actually happened a lot more in the 90s when we were having the logging wars. So, you know, this didn't just happen back when Laura was happening. It still progressed. So yeah, the tree sit-ins were a big thing in the 90s for sure. All right. Well, I don't think we have any more questions, but we are here. Follow our parks for more content on women's herstory, especially this month. Humboldt Redwoods State Parks has Instagram. North Coast Redwoods also has Instagram, and Asilomar Beach as well. So make sure you follow us for more herstory content. And remember that there's probably a really important woman where you're from. And I challenge you to learn about their herstory. And maybe you'll find that there's actually something really important and interesting there. So thank you guys.
There were 2 questions I saw.
Okay.
Christine is wondering, how was Women's Day started?
Ooh, that's a great question. I don't know the exact answer for that.
I don't know the answer of that.
I don't know either. But that is a really good question. So we'll have to look into that.
I'm gonna find out and make a post about it later.
We don't know, but that's really good. You know, I feel like oftentimes now there's so many holidays that come up for different reasons that it's kind of hard to keep up of like the origin of some of these, but that's a really good one to find out. I'm not sure why March was picked for Women's Herstory Month, but that's a good one to find out.
That's a good call to action. Maybe that's something that you can go look up.
Yeah. I wonder if it's anything to do with like maybe like the right to vote, if like the bill was passed in that month. I wonder why March, but that's a really good question.
There was one other about how old Julia Morgan was when she graduated from architecture school.
When she graduated from architecture school, that's a great question. I want to say that she was in her later years. I know that she was in her 50s when she completed the Hearthstone. So she was probably in her later 30s, but you know what?
No, I was going to guess 30s.
I have a really amazing photo of her that I didn't get a chance to share, and she is just so fierce in this photo, and that's her in Paris. And this is before she went to college. She was living there and getting ready. And a very famous picture of Julia that you'll see is her in her later years. Mm-hmm. So a lot of her architecture didn't happen until her later 40s and her 50s. And remember, she went to college twice. So something to think about. Sometimes we have more layers. Life is a long journey, and you never know when your greatest accomplishment can happen. And so the idea here is never to give up on that.
Great questions from everybody. And yeah, there's just so much more to learn. And we just urge you to do some research and find out about some of the herstory where you're from. But thank you guys so much for joining us today. Isabella, always great seeing you.
You too. Yeah, thank you all for joining, and happy International Women's Day and Women's Herstory Month. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
All right, bye.